We're joined now by former Vice President Kamala Harris, who has a new book out called 107 Days. That's a nearly day-by-day account of her run for president and a 2024 campaign. Vice President Harris, thank you for joining us this morning.
Thank you, Michael. It's good to be with you.
Great to be with you. And we're just going to dive right into it because everyone seems to have their own theory. But why do you feel or believe that you lost the 2024 presidential election?
Well, I talk about a lot of the factors that I think contributed to the outcome. But the reason I wrote the book is, Michael, it really was an unprecedented election. You think about it. A sitting vice president running for re-election, 3.5 months before the election decides not to run. The sitting vice president then takes up the mantle, running against a former president of the United States who had been running for 10 years with 107 days to go. It's unprecedented. It was the closest presidential election in the 21st century. And as history writes about that election, I felt very strongly that I wanted to make sure my voice was present in how that election is discussed and covered. It's part of American history, and I wanted to make sure my voice would be a part of that.
So did you believe 107 days was enough? Did you wish of course you wish you had more time, but do you think it was enough? And if not, do you think that any other Democrat could have pulled it off in 107 days?
It was not enough. I can't predict the outcome. We have lots of stars in our party. I'm sure that there are many people who would have done a great job. I can't predict what the outcome would have been.
Well, how do you, there were some Democrats who said that you don't take enough responsibility for the loss. How do you respond to that?
As I say many times in different ways in the book, the buck stopped with me, and I'm clear about that. I'm clear about that. And there were so many factors. You know, one of the aspects of those 107 days that I think is important to remember as we go forward is that we have an individual in the White House, the President Trump, who in running for re-election made a lot of promises to the American people that he did not keep. I talk extensively about the fact he said that his main reason for running, and on day one, he was going to bring down prices. And I do believe a lot of people voted for him with that priority in mind. And look at where we are today. Inflation is up, the cost of food is up, unemployment is up. He did not keep that promise to the American people. And we also need to remember those 107 days around some other stuff that he said. Mass deportations, that he would weaponize the Department of Justice against his political enemies, that he would silence critics. And he has done that consistently. Mass deportations, you know, somebody told me recently a story about a fellow they were talking with who was a big supporter of President Trump when he was running. He's a Floridian, he's Cuban descent. And he shared the story of how his life partner, his wife, is now in deportation proceedings to be sent to Sudan. And when asked, what happened? Why did you have so much support for him? He said, well, I believed what he said, that he was going to only go after criminals. So part of the reason that I have written this book is for us to remember that there is somebody in the White House right now that made a whole lot of promises that were either about what would aggrandize and help him met out his vengeance, or about lies he told to the American people that he obviously never intended to keep.
And let's talk about somebody who was in the White House with you, President Biden. President Biden said he believed that he insists that he would have won the race. So when you hear him say that, how does that make you feel?
I think that the reality of it is that, for me, I'm not going to predict what didn't happen. The reality is, and listen, I talk about how difficult January 6th was for me, of 2024, not to mention 2020, when I fulfilled my constitutional duty and responsibility as Vice President of the United States and President of the United States Senate to stand there as the former Democratic nominee for president and certify the election. Because I believe very strongly that in spite of all the other nonsense that might be coming out of my former opponent, I was not about to degrade the role of Vice President of the United States around acknowledging a free and fair election and the peaceful transfer of power, which is part of the hallmark of who we have presented ourselves to be as the United States of America.
Well, you said in the book that that's the hardest thing that you had to do.
It's one of the hardest things I've ever had to do, Michael.
But there are so many people out there who felt that President Biden shouldn't have run for re-election. And you wrote in the book that it was, quote, Joe and Jill's decision, that other Democrats decided it was Joe and Jill's decision. Well, do you regret not voicing your opinion in that moment?
Yes, and I actually have reflected on that, and I've written about that. I realized.
Would it have mattered if you did?
I don't know. But I can only take responsibility for myself. Mm-hmm. And on reflection, and I talk about it in the context of asking a question of myself: was that grace to not bring it up to him, or was it reckless? Mm. And on my part, I do reflect on that and feel that there was a recklessness about not raising it with him. I talk about what was going through my head, right? And what was going through my head to not bring it up was that it would come off as being very self-serving and therefore maybe lack the credibility that it deserved. But I do think about it. And I also say, though, and I speak extensively about this, my concern about him running for re-election was completely separate from my admiration and knowledge about his capacity to serve as President of the United States, which was consistent and never wavered.
Well, when we sit here, as we sit here today, do you think he would have been up for running the country for 4 more years?
Here's the distinction that I make. And having had the experience myself, it is one thing to have the capacity to govern. It is another thing to go through an election for President of the United States. So you are an athlete, you may appreciate this kind of metaphor. Running for President of the United States is like being in a marathon at a sprinter's pace with people throwing tomatoes at you every step you take. It is not for the lighthearted. It takes an incredible amount of endurance and stamina. And can you imagine doing it while you are also carrying literally the weight of the world as being President of the United States? So the distinction I make is about capacity to be president and what that election would require in that campaign, especially running against Donald Trump.
Yeah, and running against Trump, you had the big debate that we all watched. And you said leading up to that debate, you got a call the day of, and the call from President Biden left you angry and disappointed. What did he say to you?
So he called me, and again, listen, this book, I am being candid in this book about behind the scenes what happened. And in a way that I hope is helpful for people to understand what that all was. And part of that call that he made to me the afternoon before the debate was to wish me luck, but also to talk about something that was more in his interest than it was in mine, especially in the context of that time. But let me also say this, that a large part of why this book has been written and why I wrote it is I really want to remind the American people, and there are so many stories I tell about in those 107 days being with tens of thousands of people, Michael, people who seemingly have nothing in common, who had enthusiasm and optimism and hope about the future of our country. And I talk about it now and always. We're living in very dark times. These are troubling times. And I hope and I pray that when people read this book, they will remember the light that they had that cannot be diminished by the outcome of one election or the existence of one individual. That light exists in all of us. And we have to see it in each other and let that propel us through these dark days.
And we see your passion for politics. We see your passion for the country. You ruled out that you run for governor, California.
Correct. That's correct.
Are you ruling out a run, or are you ruling out a run for president in 2028?
I'm not focused on that right now. I'm really not. I'm really excited about my book tour.
Well,
you know,
do you
I'm
think this book-
excited about being out and listening to folks. I think it's important to listen, you know, and elevate people's voices. You know, there's such, when I'm out and about, I can't tell you the number of people that come up to me crying.
Well, do you think that writing this book could have burned some bridges, though, that could help you politically?
No, and that's not my intention, and I hope not. You know, if you're talking about the chatter about who I talk about, we have nothing but stars as far as I'm concerned in the party, and I talk glowingly about who they are and what they are contributing. And frankly, I think that part of the problem that we have right now in terms of the punditry is to suggest that we are waiting for a Messiah and the Savior and the saving message, instead of seeing that we actually have a lot of stars who are doing very good work, pushing back, but also talking about what we stand for. And I think it's time that we also recognize that that is counterproductive, to keep saying who is the one, instead of seeing in front of us how rich we are in terms of talent. And let's support that.
All right, they'll support that. We'll see if people will be supporting you if you announce you're going to run in 2028.
Oh my goodness! I just buy the book. Just buy the book.
Just buy the book. All right. Well, former Vice President Kamala Harris, thank you. Thank you so much for joining us. And yes, go out and buy the book. It is a great read. 107 Days is available now.